Now we'll finish up with a trio of listener questions. We'll do these a little rapid fire, all from friends of the show. First one coming from Warren Allsworth. Does this year's UK Open overtake 2018, of course, that being the one that was behind closed doors and had Mark Walsh in a hoodie, does it overtake the 2018 UK Open as the oddest of all time?
This is a great question, and it could have been our question of the week, actually. And I don't think there's anything that gets more odd than Mark Walsh playing a major in a hoodie. And as you say, for our listeners who might be newer to darts or don't remember the 2018 UK Open, it was the week of Storm Emma. It forced the Premier League night in Exeter the evening before to be cancelled. 11 players who were going to be in the UK Open, they all had to withdraw because of the bad weather, and no fans apart from players, guests were in there. So it was virtually behind closed doors because of the snow and ice at that time. And obviously at that time it was surreal to see that, but it did become the norm for darts, behind closed doors darts in 2020, 2021 with the pandemic. But back then we'd never seen anything like that before. And there were some surprise results. We had Michael van Gerwen and Peter Wright both going out on the Friday night. Peter Wright, he was the defending champion, lost to Nathan Rafferty, who was a relative unknown back then, in the last 64, and that was a game that wasn't played on the main stage as well. So as much as we're complaining about Danny Noppert not getting that main stage treatment, we saw it happen back then as well with Peter Wright, who was a top 2, top 3 player back then. But we had some surprise names in the quarterfinals. Robert Owen, John Part, his comeback weekend for him, Steve West, David Pallett, and a couple of those getting to semi-finals as well. But the two big names, I guess, that got through to the semi-finals, they were kept apart, Gary Anderson and Corey Cadby. And I don't think, although Corey Cadby, it was a first major final for him, I think we'd seen enough on the tour to say that he could have runs like this, and we'd seen him get to a World Series final and winning a World Youth Championship as well. So it wasn't a big shock for me seeing him get to the final. But with this year's UK Open, you're bound to get some surprise names in that final day, and we had that this year. Richie Burnett, probably the most surprising of them. Then you'd say Adam Gavlas, and then on a similar par, I'd say Andrew Gilden and Martin Schindler. And I think the one thing that points towards it being 2023 is the end result, Andrew Gilden winning the title. But I think you could make a case for either, but I think I'm going to give the nod to 2018 just because of everything that went on behind the scenes, and Mark Walsh playing in a hoodie. It doesn't get much more odd than that.
Yeah, I think the weather in 2018 made a difference. And, there were a lot of players who weren't able to compete because they weren't able to get to the event because of the weather. The flights from Ireland were canceled, so neither of the Irish players made it. I remember Zoran Lerchbacher was not able to get there. A few of the other players who were coming from far away. I mean, I remember someone looking to see whether they could get on a boat to sail because there was no other way to get down because the roads were all snowed over. And I remember that was the year I was living overseas. So I was thankfully in a place that didn't have as much snow, but it was still the most snow I had ever seen in the UK. Travel was nigh on impossible. Factor that with the addition that there was pretty much the only people there were the players, the managers, and their families. It led to just and the cold weather inside the venue itself just led to some crazy results. I mean, obviously, having both Robert Owen and David Pallett make the semifinals, John Part, who hadn't done anything, he only qualified because this was back the last year that they had the UK Open qualifiers. He won a couple matches, I think the last event, to just sneak in on countback to the UK Open and then go on a run to the quarterfinals. I remember his win over Mervyn King in, I think, the last 16. It was just unexpected. Can't really say it was turn back the clock because I don't think John Part really played that well on any match, but he just kept figuring out how to do enough to win. Led to a really crazy result. You mentioned Corey Cadby making the finals. Really not that surprising because he had won one of the UK Open qualifiers and everyone knew his pedigree. But a lot of really weird results coupled with the weather and just a bizarre atmosphere. I think you have to say 2018 was odder.